For 1,000 years, no army had broken these walls. Emperors had come and gone. Rome itself, in the far west, had fallen and turned to ruin. And still the great triple walls of Constantinople stood, moat, outer rampart, and a towering inner wall, the most formidable fortifications the medieval world had ever built. Behind them sheltered the last living fragment of the Roman Empire, a city already 1,123 years old. 23 armies, by later count, had tried these walls and failed. On the night of the 28th of May, 1453, a 21st army waited in the dark beyond the moat. And this time, the walls would not hold. This is the night Constantinople fell. To feel the loss, you must first see the city as it was. They called it simply the city, as if there were no other. Constantinople. Founded in the year 330 by Constantine the Great as a new Rome in the east, it had once been the richest city in the Christian world. 500,000 people had crowded its harbors and hills. Its markets carried silk from China and gold from Africa. At its heart rose Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, for nearly 1,000 years the largest cathedral on earth, a dome so vast it seemed, wrote those who stood beneath it, to hang from heaven by a chain. This was the heir of Rome, the last of it, and by 1453 it was dying, for the empire behind those walls was now a ghost of itself. It had been fading for centuries, its provinces lost, its armies gone, its treasury empty, and its deepest wound had been dealt not by a foreign enemy, but by fellow Christians. In the year 1204, the soldiers of the Fourth Crusade had turned aside from the Holy Land, stormed Constantinople, and sacked it for 3 days. The city never truly recovered. By 1453, the empire that once ruled the Mediterranean was little more than the city itself and a few scattered scraps. Perhaps 50,000 people now lived in streets built for 10 times that number. Fields grew inside the walls. It was a capital with almost no country left, a hollow crown, waiting for someone to take it. 2 men now faced each other across those walls. Inside stood Constantine XI of the ancient Palaiologos line, the last in an unbroken succession of Roman emperors stretching back in name to Augustus himself. A soldier, dutiful and brave, he had inherited a throne that was almost an act of mourning. Outside stood Mehmed II, the Ottoman sultan, just 21 years old. Where older men saw an impossible fortress, Mehmed saw destiny. The city sat within his growing empire like an island he did not own, and he meant to have it. He had studied its walls, its history, its every failed siege. And he had grasped the one thing that might undo 1,000 years of stone. Not courage, not numbers, engineering. Here is where the story turns on a single bitter irony. Some months before, a cannon founder had come to the emperor in Constantinople, a Hungarian named Orban, offering to cast guns greater than any the world had seen. But the emperor was destitute. He could not pay the man's price. So Orban went instead to the sultan, who could and paid him lavishly. For Mehmed, Orban built a monster. Sources differ on its exact size, and later accounts surely grew in the telling, but by every account it was gigantic, a bombard so vast it took teams of oxen to drag, and could hurl a stone ball weighing hundreds of pounds. When it fired, the ground shook for miles. The walls that had turned away 23 armies were built centuries before such a weapon could exist, and now it was aimed at them. In early April of 1453, the Ottoman army arrived, and the siege began. Against tens of thousands, the exact number we cannot know, for the sources vary and often inflate, Constantine could muster perhaps 7,000 men. Greeks defending their homes, a few hundred Venetians, and a company of Genoa soldiers under a famous captain, Giovanni Giustiniani, who had come of his own will to help hold the walls. Day after day, Orban's great guns hammered the ancient stone until whole sections crumbled into the moat. And each night, under fire, the defenders and the citizens, men and women, monks and children, climbed into the rubble and rebuilt what had been broken by morning. For 6 long weeks, against every expectation, the walls still held. But they could not hold forever, not against those guns. And so the city fixed its eyes on the horizon, waiting for the one thing that might save it, a great fleet, sailing from the Christian West. Then Mehmed did something almost no one had imagined. On one side, the city was protected by a deep inlet, the Golden Horn, its mouth sealed by a massive iron chain drawn across the water, keeping every enemy ship out. The chain had held for centuries. so the Sultan simply went around it. In a single night, his men laid a road of greased wooden rollers over the hill behind the district of Galata and hauled dozens of warships overland, up and over the ridge, and down into the Golden Horn, behind the chain. At dawn, the defenders looked out upon the one stretch of water they had thought safe and saw an Ottoman fleet floating there as if it had fallen from the sky. Now the walls were threatened on every side, and the thin line of defenders had to stretch thinner still. But that hope was thinner than it looked. Constantine had begged the West for years, had even agreed to unite the Eastern and Western churches, a bitterly unpopular price, in exchange for aid. Yet the West was slow and divided and far away. A handful of ships came. The vast fleet the city prayed for did not. In the last days, a single vessel slipped out past the enemy to watch the horizon for the sails of a relief force and found the sea empty. It returned to tell the emperor that no one was coming. Constantinople would face the largest army in the world essentially alone. And Mehmed, sensing the end, ordered his men to prepare for one final assault. On the evening of the 28th of May, a strange quiet fell over the Ottoman camp as the army rested for what was coming. Inside the walls, the bells rang, and something extraordinary happened. Greeks and Italians, Orthodox and Catholic, peoples who had quarreled for centuries, walked together in procession through the streets, carrying their icons, and gathered beneath the great dome of Hagia Sophia for what many knew would be the last service ever held there. The emperor spoke to his commanders, then took his place on the walls among his soldiers. Just after midnight, it began. Wave upon wave hurled themselves at the broken ramparts, first the irregulars, then the seasoned troops, and at last the Sultan's finest, the Janissaries, while the great guns roared and the night sky burned. And still, for hours, the defenders held. Then, in the space of a few minutes, everything came apart. Two things broke the defense, and one of them, the record admits, may be part legend. First, the fact. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese captain who had held the line for 7 weeks, was struck by a shot and gravely wounded. His men carried him from the wall, and seeing their commander borne away bleeding, his soldiers' resolve collapsed, and a gap opened in the line. And second, so the story goes, told by one chronicler who was near the city, a small postern gate called the Kerkerporter had been left unlocked. Through it, Ottoman soldiers slipped inside the walls and raised their banners on a tower above the defenders. The cry went up that the city was taken, whether by the gate, or by the wound, or by both together. After 1,000 years, the walls of Constantinople had finally been breached. What happened next, in the grey light of the 29th of May, we know partly as fact and partly as legend, and honesty requires we keep them apart. The fact: the city fell, and Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor, died that morning fighting among his men. The legend, beautiful and told ever since, though its details we cannot confirm, says he tore off the imperial regalia that marked him as emperor, so that he might die as a common soldier, and charged into the enemy, and was never seen again. His body was never certainly identified. Then came 3 days of sack, as was the custom of the age, the city plundered, its people killed or taken, and Mehmed rode to Hagia Sophia, the church that had stood for 900 years, and ordered it made a mosque. The great dome that had seemed to hang from heaven now looked down upon a new empire. The Roman line that began with Augustus had ended, and so the last piece of Rome was gone, on a single morning in spring, more than 1,000 years after the West had fallen. The Ottomans made the city their capital. In time it became Istanbul, and thrives to this day. Mehmed, just 21, would be remembered as the conqueror. Some say scholars fleeing the ruin carried the learning of the ancient world into Italy and helped kindle the Renaissance, though the truth is gentler and more tangled, and historians rightly warn against so neat a story. What is certain is quieter. A thing that had endured for more than 1,000 years, that men believed would stand until the end of the world, was simply over. The Greeks who survived would tell a legend that the last emperor did not die, but was turned to marble and hidden beneath the city, to wake one day and take it back. He has not woken. Perhaps that is what the fall of every empire leaves behind, not an ending anyone quite believes, but a people in the ruins, still waiting for the marble to stir. Would you have believed the walls could fall? Tell me below, and I will see you among the ashes.